Wednesday, November 11th, 2020. And we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. We have a lot to talk about on today's show. It is Veterans Day. And we're going to, in addition to our news roundup segment, we're going to talk about some of the history of Veterans Day, but also African-American World War I veterans. We'll talk about the Harlem Hellfighters, and we'll deal with what happened to African-American World War I veterans when they came back to the U.S. You had a new sense of pride, a new sense of dignity. You had what was called the New Negro. This is taking place during the Great Migration, at the beginning of the Great Migration, which starts in about 1915. And you're going to the year after World War I ends, basically in 1918. The year after that is the Red Summer of 1919, when you have over 25 major race riots in this country. Okay. And we'll talk about how African-American World War I veterans fought back against racist mobs during the Red Summer. Okay, so it's important to understand this chronology of history. Okay, it's important to understand this chronology of history. All right, so we'll talk about that, and then also we'll give an update on what's going on with coronavirus. Coronavirus is the U.S. set a record once again. This is I think this is the fifth day in a row of daily records. 145,000 new coronavirus cases today. 145,000 new coronavirus cases today. It's not getting better. It's not going away. It's getting worse. It is spreading. It's getting worse. The infection rate is worse. We're also seeing that in the state of Michigan, we're seeing a increase in coronavirus cases also in the state of Michigan as well. Okay, so we'll deal with, we're going to give you an update on what's taking place. The U.S. sees 1 million coronavirus cases in just 10 days. The U.S. sees 1 million coronavirus cases in just 10 days. It took 3 months to go from 0 to 1 million cases. We talked about this on yesterday's show. It took 3 months to go from 0 to 1 million cases, the first 1 million. It took 10 days to go from 9 million cases to 10 million cases. I want people to pay attention to me. People who are playing around, going to parties, hanging out, sitting at restaurant, going to restaurants, just sitting there chit-chatting, just acting like everything's all right with your mask down around your chin. And when you go research how people catch coronavirus, they're much more likely to have eaten inside of a restaurant when they catch coronavirus. As I explained to people, I've been studying coronavirus since January. And if you watch my show, I've been warning you that this was going to get worse. People are playing games. You have a record number of people hospitalized with coronavirus. 61,000 people. There's a record number of people hospitalized with coronavirus around the country. Okay. If you study the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, and I've studied that, I've done an entire presentation on this. We've talked about that here on this show. If you study the Spanish flu pandemic, you understand what happens when you have some incompetent leadership. Now, Woodrow Wilson was a better president than Donald Trump. Not much, but he was a better president than Donald Trump. But when you go study the Spanish flu pandemic or the Great Pandemic of 1918, problem there was that the U.S. government, because it was during World War I, the U.S. government was not being upfront and honest with the American people. I'll probably have to do a presentation again dealing with the great pandemic in 1918, because there are parallels to this right here, what's going on. So while a lot of people were talking about Oprah and Gail and Jada Pinkett Smith and Snoop Dogg and Kobe, and Jada said what Snoop said about what Gail said about Kobe and all this stuff, hurt her feelings, we were dealing with coronavirus. So when people ask me, oh, well, why don't you go to parties? Why don't you go to this? Why don't you go to that? The country's opening back up. I'm like, yeah, okay. Keep playing around if you want to. Now, what people have to understand, I want you to listen very closely to me. The U.S. is setting a record highs day after day. And Thanksgiving is not here yet. The U.S. 145,000 new cases today for Wednesday. It was 100. It was about 135,000 on Tuesday. What do you think is going to happen when Thanksgiving gets here? And people and families are going over other people's houses having these super spreader events. I understand wanting to be with family. You need to do that through Zoom. You need to do that through FaceTime. Seriously, because this is what the CDC is recommending. Look, don't have gatherings, because guess what's going to gather? Coronavirus. If it's spread, if you have a record number of people hospitalized across the country now with coronavirus, what do you think is going to happen a week after Thanksgiving? 2 weeks after Thanksgiving? This is what happens when you have incompetent leadership. Donald Trump hasn't spoken for 5 days. Now, a lot of people appreciate the quietness, but this is dereliction of duty. So we'll talk about this on today's show. Everybody share this broadcast to your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. We'll give you an update on what's going on with coronavirus. We'll talk about Donald Trump still not conceding. Lawrence O'Donnell on The Last Word on MSNBC said that Donald Trump's silence is his concession speech. I was listening to Reverend Al Sharpton's show, Keeping It Real. He's on right here on this radio station Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Keeping It Real. And there was this Donald Trump supporter that called in today. A dumbass Donald Trump supporter, okay? And he lied and said that Hillary Clinton did not concede to Donald Trump winning through the Electoral College. That's not true. She gave a concession speech November 9th, 2016. All the news outlets covered it. All you have to do is Google Hillary Clinton concession speech and it'll come up. She conceded. She didn't like it. She knew she was robbed. She knew Donald Trump got help from Russia. She knew Donald Trump mentioned WikiLeaks 164 times in the last 30 days of the 2016 presidential campaign. But she gave a concession speech. He hasn't given one. So just let that sink in. And then I saw this story. We posted this story here from the Huffington Post. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican, Donald Trump sycophant, wants to allow armed citizens to shoot looters and rioters. Does he want them to? Is this for the white people who are rioting? Because there's some of them. You have a history. Florida to stand your ground law. Alec, Americans. Florida, your ground law. Ron DeSantis, who beat Andrew Gillum. I can't. I really needed to Gillum. some people say, oh, Andrew Gillum doesn't have a black agenda. Well, Ron DeSantis has an anti-black agenda. An anti-black agenda is worse than not having a black agenda. I guarantee you, if Andrew Gillum were governor of Florida, there'll be more people alive. I guarantee you, he would have taken action sooner to fight against coronavirus, and he would not have opened back up the state too soon to appease Donald Trump. So we'll talk about this as well. A former Miami-Dade County prosecutor blasted the bill as a gift to vigilantes and said it will allow, quote, death to be the punishment for a property crime, end quote. This is in Florida. Florida is also where you had the Coy massacre of November 3rd, 1920. We talked about that here on this show back on election day. And that was an election day massacre, November 3rd, 1920, the Coy massacre, okay, of 1920. And that was in Coy, Florida. You had about 50 African Americans killed for exercising their right to vote. It was November 2nd. Okay, November 2nd. November 3rd, 1874. That was the Eufaula, Alabama massacre. But November 2nd, 1920, that was in Florida, Coy, Florida. Trayvon Martin was in Florida. January 1923, Rosewood, that was in Florida. Elections have consequences. This is one of the reasons why we study history, so we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past, in the present, and the future to meet the needs of the community. A people's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past, in the present, and the future to meet the needs of the community. Okay, so we'll talk about this and more today on the African History Network show. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. Now, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, and at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. All right. So this really helps us keep doing the research, keep broadcasting, keep doing this show, because we're on 6 nights a week now instead of 1 night a week. We were just doing Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 4 years. And then starting October 12th, we started doing Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight. So we're here 6 nights a week. OK. All right. So let's look at what's going on with coronavirus. In 1 week, new daily coronavirus cases in U.S. go from 104,000 to 145,000. Latest all time, 145,000 cases in 1 day. While experts say nationwide mask use is currently the best strategy to combat coronavirus, with more than 10 million coronavirus cases reported across the U.S. It's actually 10.4 million coronavirus cases reported across the U.S. Public health experts are calling for universal face mask usage. Here's why. Okay. Now, some people like Donald Trump should wear a face mask regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not, just as a common courtesy to humanity. But that's another conversation. As we talked about on the show yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci was on MSNBC with Andrea Mitchell, and he talked about how new research shows that wearing a face mask also benefits the person who is wearing the face mask as well. Okay. All right. Now, in 1 week, new daily coronavirus cases in the United States went from 104,000 to more than 145,000 on Wednesday. The latest all-time high. And check out the updates from Washington Post. They have some really, really good updates dealing with coronavirus. Almost every metric is trending in the wrong direction as states add restrictions and health officials warn of a dangerous fall ahead. Now, keep in mind, we're in flu season. You got coronavirus, you've got flu season, and you have incompetent leadership in the White House who's pushing herd immunity. It's expected that by the end of this year, at the rate we're going now, in 10 days, 1 million new coronavirus cases. It's expected by the end of this year, we could be at 20 million cases of coronavirus. We're at 241,000 deaths approximately. Keep in mind, 20% of the deaths are African Americans. So when African Americans were out voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it wasn't because we were in love with Democrats or in love with Joe Biden or Kamala. For many of us, we're voting for self-preservation. We're voting our interests. We're voting for self-preservation because the first thing you got to do is get coronavirus under control. 41% of African American owned businesses have been wiped out as of April 2020. Well, hell, we're in November. It's at least probably 50% by now. So we voted for self-preservation. We voted our interests. This ain't about political party. This is about Donald Trump in 2016 asked African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? I told you the correct answer was everything. Almost every metric is trending in the wrong direction as states add restrictions and health officials warn of a dangerous fall ahead. The rise in now, what do you think is going to happen when Christmas comes? And people want to have Christmas parties and people want to visit family members and coronavirus is raging. The rise in infections comes with new highs in the number of deaths reported in a single day at 1,549, the highest since May 14th, 2020. Okay. Now, yesterday it was about 1,400 new cases that were reported. Okay, now it's 1,549 new cases in a single day of deaths. Tennessee, Alabama, and Minnesota all reached new highs in the number of deaths reported. In the number of deaths, in the number of deaths reported. Okay, we'll continue this on the other side of the break. List of the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. For 25 years, the Black History 101 Mobile Museum has carried on the rich legacy of the Black Museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of the Black experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Dr. Khalid El Hakim is the founder of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum, and he is a highly sought-after public speaker on topics of Black history, social studies, education, museum studies, hip-hop, and race relations. Dr. Khalid was named among the change makers for NBC Universal's Erase the Hate campaign and listed as one of the 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, please contact Dr. Khalid Al-Hakim directly at 313-645-4197, 313-645-4197, or visit their website at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. You can also email him at bhistory101@yahoo.com, bhistory101@yahoo.com. Sage and Elm Apothecary creates unique products, especially with you in mind. They use simple ingredients such as whole fruits, herbs, and vegetables. Each product crafted offers a unique plant-based experience. Their holistic approach to self-care formulate their product inventory. They're proud to serve our community of plant-based product supporters and offerings for the entire family. Sage and Elm Apothecary designs over 60 different beautifully handcrafted soaps, natural toothpaste, hydrating oils, deodorants, face masks, shampoos, conditioners, and so much more. Visit their website at sageandelmapothecary.com. That's sageandelmapothecary.com, APOTHECARY, and find out about their upcoming events throughout the year. Allow Sage and Elm Apothecary to provide for all of your plant-based needs. Use promo code AHNWinter20, AHNWinter20 for a special discount. Revitalizing, restorative, indulgent, essential. Crea's Love Butter Raw Shea Butter Collection. How do we know if our skin products are truly delivering all of the health benefits they should? Crea's Love Butter is a thoughtful combination of hand-selected ingredients designed to enhance the level of your skin's health. Crea's Love Butter is an ideal gift for health-conscious loved ones and is a pleasure to both give and receive. They've harnessed the restorative powers of raw shea butter and infused it with their love and passion for revitalizing skin that you will undoubtedly feel from the first use. Visit their website today, creaslovebutter.com, CREAS, creaslovebutter.com. Put your skin in the game. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Wednesday, November 11th, 2020, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Calling number is 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600. Okay, so right before the break, we'll give you an update on what's going on with coronavirus. So the rise in infections comes from, so we have 145,000 new cases reported on Wednesday, November 11th. That's a record number for one-day cases. The rise in infections comes with new highs in the number of deaths reported in a single day at 1,549, the highest since May 14th. Tennessee, Alabama, and Minnesota all reached new highs in the number of deaths reported in a single day. So now coronavirus cases continue to soar across much of Europe as several countries struggle to contain surges in hospitalizations and deaths. Donald Trump is convinced a medical deep state deliberately tried to sabotage his electoral prospects. No, it was you. And we're just not that into you. That's what it was. Another White House official who attended Trump's election night gathering, that super spreader event, has tested positive for coronavirus. We see that more than 10.3 million infections, actually 10.4 million infections, and 241,000 deaths have been reported to date in the U.S. Check out the updates from the Washington Post. And we're going to look at, flip back over here. I want to look at some of this here. Now, prisons and jails have become a public health threat during the pandemic, advocates say. Okay. And then also for people who say, well, this increase in coronavirus cases is because of protests that were taking place. If you've been following the protests, the height of the protests were in June and then going through July. This is November. Okay, I'm just saying. Nobody knows how the novel coronavirus sneaked through the barbed wire and imposing gates of Ohio's Pickaway Correctional Institution, where visitors and volunteers were barred from entering in March 2020. But the first case showed up April 4th. Within a week, 23 inmates and 17 staff members were found to be infected. 23 inmates and 17 staff members were found to be infected in a week. One inmate, Charles Vinnie Jr., a 66-year-old with a collapsed lung, died hours after testing positive. Within a month, more than 3/4 of Pickaway's roughly 2,000 inmates were confirmed positive. By the end of May, 35 were dead. Now, Pickaway, where officials acknowledged that efforts to control viral spread were hectic and hindered by imperfect testing, exemplifies the broad challenges facing the nation's jail and prison systems in the grip of the pandemic. Conditions long considered degrading, including overcrowded, unsanitary housing, and inadequate inmate health care, have in many places become deadly. Check out this piece from the Washington Post. Prisons and jails have become a public health threat during the pandemic, advocates say. Now, one of the reasons why coronavirus, the infection rate is spreading so much now over like this month, is because it's getting colder outside in general across the country. And when it gets colder, we're in fall right now. When it gets colder, people retreat indoors as opposed to being outside more. People retreat indoors. And when they're indoors, they are in closer proximity to one another. And this allows coronavirus to spread much faster. If you think about during the summer, okay, if you went to a restaurant, a lot of people were eating outdoors. Well, they ain't eating out in most places. They're not eating outdoors now. Now, maybe in some areas, maybe Florida or, maybe some areas where it's a warmer climate. But in general, like in Detroit, most people are not eating outdoors now. Okay. Or in some other places where it may be colder, they're not eating outdoors now. So they're still eating inside. Yeah, I don't know why the hell you eating inside. You better get that stuff to go. I'm trying to tell you. I haven't eaten inside in months. I don't want one. We set out crazy. When crisis likely. Now, it did not make a distinction. That report specifically did not make a distinction of whether they ate inside or outside the restaurant. But I could tell you, if you eat inside, you got a much better chance of catching coronavirus. Okay, so not me. People ask, why don't you go this way? Why don't you go here? Why don't you go this part? Not the kid. I ain't doing that. I've been studying this since January. I've been right here, damn near every day, warning you about what's coming. So no, All right. So check out these updates. There was another one. Oh, Ohio. Governor DeWine announces stricter statewide mask mandate as infections rise. This is Ohio. He's a Republican. He's one of the few Republicans that has some sense. Enforcement of Ohio's mask mandate will be beefed up amid a surge of coronavirus infections and hospitalizations, Governor Mike DeWine announced Wednesday. Responding to concerns that those defying the statewide order issued in July were further spreading the virus, Governor DeWine, a Republican, he has more sense than most Republicans, said in an evening video address that the new order will require businesses to post signs at their doors about the rule and crack down on customers who do not comply. Ohio has experienced a surge in coronavirus cases in the past month. On Wednesday, November 11th, the state reported 5,874 infections, its second highest number in a single day, after Tuesday's 6,508 cases. Okay, this ain't going away, people. All right. So we need to wear the masks. And wear it over your mouth and your nose. Because there was a study that came out that showed how coronavirus, the particles from coronavirus are spread through breathing through your nose much more so than originally thought. So it needs to cover your mouth and your nose. Let's see here. Okay, so check out the rest of these updates here from Washington Post. Okay, when we look at and if we look at the update from yesterday, we see that when it came to hospitalizations, it was 61,000 people hospitalized nationwide. Okay, 61,000 people hospitalized nationwide, which is a record. It's the highest since July. 61,900 people are hospitalized as of Tuesday with coronavirus. Okay, I want to zip through some of these updates here. Let's see here. Okay. So we saw that Joe Biden and Donald Trump both paid respects at visited Arlington National Cemetery today for Veterans Day. Now, Joe Biden, his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, the people with Joe Biden all wore masks. Donald Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, the people with Donald Trump didn't wear masks. All right. Y'all gonna catch it too. Trying to tell you, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they're gonna have the entire White House sanitized because of these nasty ass people up in there. They're gonna have to have the whole thing sanitized. Okay, people are playing around. So we see lawsuits still being filed. No evidence. They're basically providing no evidence of wrongdoing when it comes to the votes. With the race still too close to call in Georgia, the state will conduct a full hand recount. Biden leads Trump there by more than 14,000. Well, all the recounts, all the lawsuits, it's not going to change anything. Okay, Joe Biden is up by about 5 million popular votes. All right. All right, so we'll talk some more about this on tomorrow's show. I want to look at this other story here. This is from Huffington Post. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis wants to allow armed citizens to shoot looters and rioters. It's as if Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican, of course, is unaware that there's a public health crisis and tropical storm cleanup he could be pouring his time into. The Miami Herald reported Tuesday that Florida's Republican governor has drafted quote unquote anti-mob legislation that would drastically expand the state's stand your ground law, which currently allows people to use deadly force to defend themselves if they think they're in danger of being killed or seriously harmed by another person, per Fort Myers News Press. Now, critics blasted the bill as a gift to would-be vigilantes. Former Miami-Dade County Prosecutor Aubrey Webb, W-E-B-B, told the outlet he worries that language in the drafted legislation is too vague and gives armed citizens the power to kill as they subjectively determine what constitutes criminal mischief. Now, if Andrew Gillum were governor of Florida, you think he would go along with something like this? You think he'd propose something like this? Elections have consequences. I can't stress this enough. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis' proposal would expand the quote unquote stand your ground law to property crime and allow the use of force against quote violent or disorderly assemblies, end quote. Allow use of force against quote violent or disorderly assemblies or criminal mischief occurring with 500 feet of a business that is experiencing interruption or impairment due to this conduct, according to the Miami Herald, which said it obtained emails and a copy of the bill draft or the draft of the bill. Violent or disorderly assemblies. You think they're talking about the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys having violent or disorderly assemblies? Who do you think this is directed towards? Who is this the crackdown on white supremacist groups? Is this the crackdown on the Proud Boys or the Poor Boys, as Joe Biden called them? Is this the crackdown on white supremacist vigilante groups like the ones that were plotting to storm the state capitol building in the state of Michigan and Lansing, Michigan, and kidnap elected officials, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and put them on trial and possibly execute them? You think this is directed towards them? Governor Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, not in 1920, in 2020. His proposal would expand the stand your ground law to property crime and allow the use of force against, quote, violent or disorderly assemblies, end quote, or criminal mischief occurring within 500 feet of a business that is experiencing, quote, interruption or impairment, end quote, due to this conduct. Now, the legislation would also make it a third-degree felony to block traffic during a protest, offer immunity to drivers who claim to have unintentionally killed or injured protesters who block traffic, and withhold state funds from local governments that cut law enforcement budgets, the Miami Herald reports. You remember me telling you last night when people talk about, oh, I'm not voting for this candidate because they don't have a black agenda. I said the first people you have to identify and stop are the candidates who have an anti-black agenda. Let me repeat this for you. This is not 1920. This is not the governor during the Ocoee, Florida massacre of November 2nd, 1920. This is Governor Ron DeSantis, who's governor right now. The legislation would also make it a third-degree felony to block traffic during a protest, offer immunity to drivers who claim to have unintentionally killed or injured protesters who block traffic, and withhold state funds from local governments that cut law enforcement budgets. So they want to reallocate resources into quality of life and mental health and education and reduce the budgets of law enforcement departments. The first thing you have to do is identify and stop the candidate who has an anti-black agenda, because an anti-black agenda is worse than not having a black agenda. The language protecting drivers follows a wave of right-wing vehicle ramming attacks against peaceful protesters this summer. Quote, it allows for vigilantes to justify their actions, end quote. Denise Georges, a former Miami-Dade County prosecutor who had handled stand your ground cases, told the Miami Herald. It also allows for death to be the punishment for a property crime, and that is cruel and unusual punishment. We cannot live in a lawless society where taking a life is done so casually and recklessly. Well, you can when you don't think Black Lives Matter. You can when you operate based upon a white supremacist mentality. Are they putting together this law for the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys and these white supremacist organizations? The KKK, is this who this is for? You want to make it a felony to block traffic. Now, if you go back in about 2018, there was proposals in about 19 different state legislatures, Republican-dominated state legislatures, who were trying to criminalize protesting. They were trying to criminalize protesting. Who do you think that's directed towards? 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. If you have a question or comment, don't get quiet now. The legislation is in response to police brutality protests that surged across Florida and the United States this summer after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, May 25th, 2020. It also mirrors Donald Trump's attitudes toward the largely peaceful demonstrations. What the hell do you have to lose? The correct answer is everything. In August of 2020, Donald Trump defended Kyle Rittenhouse, the 17-year-old Trump supporter who two people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, over Jay. Kyle Rittenhouse was an armed vigilante. 17. He had an assault rifle. That's illegal. You had to be at least 18 in most states. Some states, you had to be at least 18. He was 17. That's a felony right there. Rittenhouse was an armed vigilante from out of state who came to the Black Lives Matter protest with an assault style rifle to quote unquote protect property. He's so concerned about property. In September, his mama drove him too. Okay. So in September 2020, Donald Trump's Justice Department designated New York City, Seattle, and Portland, 3 cities where anti-racism protests loomed large, as, quote, anarchist jurisdictions. Anarchist jurisdictions. Now, this is the president of lawlessness and disorder wanting to talk about anarchy. He's the president of lawlessness and disorder. The department claimed that these cities, quote, permitted violence and destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract criminal activities, end quote, and threatened to take away the city's federal funding as a result. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is calling them if you have a question or comment. We'll go to the phone lines in just a second here. We're going to talk about Black World War I veterans as well. We're going to continue that discussion on my social media platforms, the African History Network on Facebook and Michael Imhotep on YouTube. If we run out of time here, let's go to the phone lines quickly. Let's go to Rod, line 1. Rod, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from.
I'm calling from Benton Harbor, Michigan, about 200 miles west.
Okay, yeah, Benton Harbor, Michigan. Okay, go ahead, Rod. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. First, I appreciate you, Brother Mike, man. You're one of our historians, and I appreciate you on Brother Roland Martin's show as well, man. Y'all been doing it big.
Thanks, man.
I want to say, it appears to me, you got Mike Pompeo and making these really horrendous remarks and gestures in front of the world, man. They're just playing gangster ball. It's like y'all say, you and Roland them said, man. They play chess. We play checkers.
And don't even understand all the rules of checkers.
I don't aspire like yourself. I don't aspire to neither party. I'm an independent. But I hear more to the Democratic Party, like you said, because of their issue, their policies align more to my life and my issue,
right,
my views.
right.
So I just want to say that it appears to me, that they got these conspiracy theories, and we don't know. Trump, he's so unpredictable. I just want to say, it's just it appears that we all know, we all see the writing on the wall, and we all know the inevitable. But it seems like they're gonna try to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. That's why we on pins and needles. Even though they don't have, it seems like they don't have a leg to stand on. It just seems that they always come out, victorious, and they're villains. They villains. So
no, they don't always come out victorious. And let me just say this very quickly. To take it to the U.S. Supreme Court, first you have to have a valid legal argument, some type of valid legal argument. You have to provide evidence. They don't have any evidence. They don't have any evidence of widespread voter fraud. Okay. Evidence of that. One. Two, has to go to it. It wouldn't go straight to the U.S. federal courts. If the U.S. decides to take up the case, because they're not obligated to take up the case, they could decline to take the case. But I don't think it's going to go. I don't think it's going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court because they don't have a legal argument. And it's like they filed 11 lawsuits. Most of them been thrown out because they don't have evidence to support fraud. And it was I think it's in Pennsylvania. They one lawsuit in Pennsylvania, and they're claiming they want 14 vote ballots thrown out, but Biden's ahead by about 2 years.
That the Supreme Court has originally said they're going to give them 2-3 days for them to come in if they were postmarked by the third.
That's what it is. So they want those thrown out. But Trump wants the military ballots that in Georgia, where they had a week for those to come in after November 3rd. He wants all those counted.
Right.
Right, because he thinks they're gonna vote for him. No, they're not. They're gonna go 75 or 80% for Joe Biden.
And you know what? And that's what everybody is predicting and optimistic about, that because the military, Trump's foolishness, it went through the military like wildfire.
Right.
And so far, the numbers better than I do. They've been the military accounts have been coming through big time for Biden.
Yeah, they have
throughout the country.
Right.
So
all
I'm
right.
optimistic about that. And again, I want to appreciate the time, man, and keep doing what you're doing, brother.
All right, I'll be back on Rolling Show Friday. Okay, I'll be back on Rolling Show Friday. Okay, all right, thanks for calling. Yeah. All right, for those that don't know, I'm on Roland Martin Unfiltered every Friday. I'm a panelist on Roland Martin Unfiltered. We share the broadcast here on our Facebook fan page, and we share some excerpts of my appearance there. We share this on our show also. Let's quickly go to Norm, line 2. Norm, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from. Or was that Rod? Whoever's next. Let's go to whoever's next.
Okay, I'm calling from Tampa, Florida.
Tampa. What's your name? Norm, okay. They sent me a number of names. I wasn't sure the order. Okay, Norm from Tampa, Florida. Thanks for calling.
Yeah. here. And I expect some activity to take place in Washington on Saturday with these Proud Boy guys.
Yeah. So the Proud Boys, just so people know, hold on just 1 second. Just so people know, the Proud Boys are going to have a rally this Saturday about 2 blocks away from the White House, if I remember correctly. Okay, in Washington D.C. They got a permit to hold it. Okay, go ahead.
I think that people really get an understanding of the whole genre, what's going on. Read this book. I'm sure you put it up. The Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. I mean, you
mean Cast by Isabella Wilkerson. Yeah, it just came out. Yeah, Caste. I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it. It just came out in the last couple of months. But go ahead.
You'll read it, man. This book lays it out. It's called The Origins of Our Discontent. And it talks about the system in America is based upon the color caste system, identical to that seen in India. It talks about how the Nazis were fascinated by the caste system here, the Jim Crow system, and in fact they found it oftentimes too repugnant for their uses, and they were in disbelief that Jews were classified as white people, when in fact in Nazi Germany Jews were classified as a separate race. They couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Well, the Nuremberg laws in Nazi Germany, Nuremberg laws were based upon the Jim Crow laws here in the U.S. Okay.
Absolutely. And that's the other curious thing. How could you have a Nuremberg trial based on Nuremberg laws that many of the so-called allies, like the British and French, and also the Americans, implemented?
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
The Germans only copied what they were doing in the but the styling thing was the Germans also thought it very cool that you would sell body parts after doing a lynching.
Right.
That's something they didn't do in Auschwitz.
Right. All right, Norm, we're out of time here. All right, thanks for calling in, man. Call back tomorrow night. Okay, we're out of time here. We're out of time for the show. Okay. I want to go to this clip here quickly. It's Veterans Day, and we're going to continue this discussion on our social media platforms, the African History Network on Facebook and Michael Imhotep on YouTube. When we deal with World War I, we deal with African American World War I, African Americans who served in World War I, 380,000 African American soldiers, members of the 369th Infantry Regiment, also known as the Harlem Hellfighters, were a all African American regiment. I want to go to this clip here from history.com about the Harlem Hellfighters. Let's go to this clip.
The Harlem Hellfighters was a regiment of New York National Guardsmen in the First World War. They were set up to fail by their own government. They were humiliated, degraded, eventually given to the French army as a throwaway. And they ended up coming home as one of the most decorated units in the entire U.S. Army.
The Harlem Hellfighters are one of the most important regiments in American history. In World War I, they helped to establish to the entire world the power of black soldiers in the military.
It was very difficult at that time for African Americans to get into the United States military because there was this perception that African Americans would not do well in battle. They had to overcome the prejudice of their own countrymen and yet also perform ably on the battlefield.
Like so many units of African American descent, when they go overseas, they're not sure what they're going to do. Are they going to fight as infantry? Or are they going to be stevedores and load ships? Or are they going to be labor units and cut wood?
And so they're committed to labor duty. They're unloading ships, building the trains, those type of support services. And as you can imagine, these men have been trained and they're willing to fight. They're ready to fight. And this is stressful for them.
They were finally given to the French army, which in a way was an even greater insult because in the First World War, when the United States entered, General Pershing, the commanding officer, was very clear that American forces would not be fed piecemeal into the French and British army. The French and British wanted reinforcements. And Pershing said absolutely not. When Americans join this war, they will fight as an American force under an American flag led by an American general. ... Except for the black guys. You can have them.
Henry Johnson is perhaps one of the most remarkable black military heroes in U.S. history.
And he found himself in no man's land with Private Needham Roberts manning a listening post.
And Needham Roberts hears click, click, click. He realizes somebody's cutting the wire. It's potentially a German raid.
Hey, pause it right there, Shakita.
And so Roberts is passing him grenades.
Pause it right. Okay. All right. That's a clip from history.com, official website of the History Channel. That's on YouTube also, the Harlem Hellfighters. We're going to continue this discussion on our social media platforms. Follow us at The African History Network on Facebook, The African History Network on Facebook, and Michael Imhotep, IMAU. We'll continue for a little while longer there. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and PayPal.me, the AHN Show through PayPal. Remember the African and popular around the world, because right now, not over 2 win. We're kind of forever. Stay tuned, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. This call. All right. We'll continue here for a little while longer. I want to get through this information to the World War I. I did not get through as much as I wanted to during the first hour because I wanted to cover that story dealing with Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, because that is dangerous. Okay, so let's go back to this. So the Harlem Hellfighters were an African-American infantry unit in World War I who spent more time in combat than any other American unit. African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network show on our nightly show. We're on Monday through Friday. And we create a video commercial for you also. And that video commercial airs when we rebroadcast these shows on our social media platforms. And also your audio commercial will air in the audio podcast of our shows. We're on 9 different podcast platforms: iHeart Radio, iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, FM Player, TuneIn, and some other platforms. Okay, so today is Veterans Day, right? So what is Veterans Day? So Veterans Day is a U.S. legal holiday dedicated to American veterans of all wars. And Veterans Day 2020 occurs on Wednesday, November 11th. Now, Veterans Day was originally known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day. Armistice means a temporary cessation of hostilities. Veterans Day dates back to World War I and the armistice that takes place in World War I on November 11th, 1918. In 1918, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, an armistice, or ARMISTICE, an armistice, or a temporary cessation of hostilities, was declared between the Allied nations and Germany during World War I. Okay, at that time, World War I was known as the Great War. Okay, because this is the war of the war between the worlds, but it was known as the Great War. Now, it was commemorated in many countries as Armistice Day the following year, 1919, on November 11th. And it became a federal holiday in the United States in 1938. In the aftermath of World War II and the Korean War, Armistice Day became known as Veterans Day. Armistice Day became known as Veterans Day. When we look at some of the history of Armistice Day, it was the Treaty of Versailles that was signed on June 28, 1919, that marked the official end of World War I. Nonetheless, the armistice date of November 11th, 1918, remained in the public imagination as the date that marked the end of the conflict. Now, 1 year later, in November 1919, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. The day's observation included parades and public gatherings, as well as a brief pause in business and school activities at 11 a.m. For more information, check out Veterans Day 2020 at history.com, the official website of the History Channel. Veterans Day 2020 at history.com. All right, now, when we look at, so if we go back and let's go back to this clip here dealing with the Harlem Hellfighters, and then we'll get into what happens when these African-American soldiers come back home. And we'll talk a little bit about the Red Summer of 1919 and how African-American World War I veterans fought back against racist mobs. Let's go back to this clip here. Oh, hold on. Sorry to hear. Let me back it up.
Units and cut wood. And so they're committed to labor duty. They're unloading ships, building the trains, those type of support services. And as you can imagine, these men have been trained and they're willing to fight. They're ready to fight. And this is stressful for them.
They were finally given to the French army, which in a way was an even greater insult because in the First World War, when the United States entered, General Pershing, the commanding officer, was very clear that American forces would not be fed piecemeal into the French and British army. Because the French and British wanted reinforcements, and Pershing said absolutely not. When Americans join this war, they will fight as an American force under an American flag, led by an American general. Except for the black guys. You can have them.
Johnson is perhaps one of the most remarkable black military heroes in U.S. history.
And he found himself in no man's land with Private Needham Roberts manning a listening post.
And Needham Roberts hears click, click, click. He realizes somebody's cutting the wire. It's potentially a German raid.
And so Roberts is passing the grenades and they line up these grenades, and the Germans actually do come across the lines. Roberts is hurt. Now Henry Johnson is left to defend their position and to stave off this attack. And then he makes the mistake of jamming a French cartridge into his American gun and no longer work. And the Germans are on top of it.
He then used his rifle like a club, and then he ended up fighting with a knife against the Kaiser's best and turned them.
He's wounded in the fray. He's struck, for example, in the foot. It has a debilitating injury as a result. And he fights them off, he says, for what seemed like an hour.
The Germans ran shrieking into the night, all because of one man.
It's not until the next morning that people realize what a tremendous act this was. They discover 4 bodies of dead German soldiers. And they also realize from the equipment and other things that are left behind that as many as 30 may have been involved in this altercation.
As soon as he drove off those Germans, the French awarded him the Croix de Guerre, a great honor. Unfortunately, it took about 75 years for the U.S. government to give him the Legion of Merit. Had he been white, he would have walked out of that war with the Medal of Honor. What was so shocking to me when I began to research the story of the Hellfighters was that after they had performed so magnificently in combat, the United States government actually sent a memorandum to the French government, essentially implementing Jim Crow, essentially saying, don't give them some notion that they are equals, because we don't want them taking that notion back to the United States and demanding equality.
When When he come back to the United States, he's not awarded the Purple Heart. There's no notation in his military record of his injury. And so he winds up not being able to work because of this injury. He doesn't get any kind of assistance from the army or from the government as a result. And he ends up dying in 1929 penniless. So it again shows the paradox. Here's this great story of valor and of courage on the part of the soldier, and ultimately he comes back to a nation that doesn't honor that sacrifice.
We tend to think we all know American history so well that the story of the Harlem Fighters should be one of the first stories told. It wasn't about killing other people, it was about being Americans serving their country well. That was the inclination of the Harlem Fighters.
When you are African American in 1917, democracy is armor, democracy is a weapon. And to fight for a war to make the world safe for democracy was something more than just some ethereal crusade for the Hellfighters. It had concrete results. They were fighting for the rights to be a citizen of the country that they were born in.
All right. Check that out at you can check that out at history.com, but it's also on the History Channel's YouTube channel, the Harlem Hellfighters. Are you ready for a new black economy? Well, Happy, the role of economics in the development of civilization, is a brand new documentary that will set you on a new path of knowledge and enlightenment. The Happy film gives viewers a snapshot of our economic history from the dawn of civilization right up until today. The underlying theme of the film is the interrelationship between the three essential components of economics, politics, and culture. Happy brings together the brightest and most prolific minds in the fields of psychology, history, business, and politics, such as Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Professor James Small, Dr. Julian Malveaux, Dr. Zahi Hawass, and Jabari Osazi, and more. Together, they deliver a message of cooperative economics, financial independence, and a pride that we can all be inspired by. The film is on sale now. It's streaming on all digital formats, or for DVD, please visit Happy, H-A-P-I, happyfilm.com. Use offer code Happy, AHN, for a 10% discount. Gain knowledge in minutes with Blacklist Ed. Blacklist Ed is an app that provides insightful summaries of books pertaining to the Black experience. As Black people, we know the importance of reading books to discover our incredible contributions to world history, to uplift our self-esteem, and to empower ourselves for our relentless fight for social justice. Unfortunately, with our busy lives, it feels like there is never enough time to read a book. Fortunately, there's a solution. With Blacklist Ed, their app provides key insights from best-selling books about the Black experience, therefore saving you time, increasing your knowledge, and empowering yourself through inspirational and actionable ideas. You can read or listen on the go. Start your free trial today by going to blacklisted.com. That's Black without the C, B-L-A-K. Or you can download the Blacklist Ed app from the App Store or Google Play. Blacklist Ed, empower yourself. Revitalizing, restorative, indulgent, essential. Crea's Love Butter Raw Shea Butter Collection. How do we know if our skin products are truly delivering all of the health benefits they should? Crea's Love Butter is a thoughtful combination of hand-selected ingredients designed to enhance the level of your skin's health. Crea's Love Butter is an ideal gift for health-conscious loved ones and is a pleasure to both give and receive. They've harnessed the restorative powers of raw shea butter and infused it with their love and passion for revitalizing skin that you will undoubtedly feel from the first use. Visit their website today, creaslovebutter.com. C-R-E-A-S, creaslovebutter.com. Put your skin in the game. Have you tasted the world famous No Frowny Brownie yet from the Pink Bakery? If not, what are you waiting for? They are vegan, gluten-free, and free of the big 8 allergens. While eating their no frowny brownies, the fabulous Miss Tabitha Brown said they were very good. Very good. And you know, if she says that, they are. The Pink Bakery is the first black-owned, big 8 allergen-free baking mix company. Go to thepinkbakery.com. That's thepinkbakery.com to order their no frowny brownie mix today. Okay. Also, when we were talking about coronavirus, I forgot to give an update on what's going on with Michigan. Michigan reports 6,008 new COVID-19 cases, 42 deaths. There are 229,285 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 7,766 deaths in Michigan. The state reported Wednesday. Okay, those are total numbers. That's up 6,008 cases from the day before. So we have 6,008 new cases in one day and 42 deaths. Michigan continues to see a surge in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. Hospitalizations for COVID-19 have doubled over the last 3 weeks, while the state death rate has increased for 5 consecutive weeks. We see hospitalizations and deaths. Hospitalizations for COVID-19 have doubled over the last 3 weeks. And we see the death rate has increased for 5 consecutive weeks here in the state of Michigan. So I think Governor Gretchen Whitmer is going to have to institute some new restrictions and probably dealing with restaurants. She may have to reduce the capacity or reduce restaurants to just. She may have to reduce restaurants to carry out only. She may have to reduce it to carry out only, as opposed to dining in, because that allows coronavirus to spread much more so dining in. All right, let's continue. So I want to 2 articles here. Time.com has a good article. African American veterans hope their service in World War I would secure their rights at home. It didn't. African American veterans hoped their service in World War I would secure their rights at home. It didn't. This is from Time.com. I posted this article last year. Last year on Veterans Day. And I'm going to pull this one up here. And then also there is one from history.com dealing with, there's also one from history.com dealing with the Red Summer of 1919. The Red Summer of 1919. And the Red Summer is basically the year after. It's the year in June of 1919. World War I officially ends, but for all practical purposes, it ends basically 1918. I want to look at this other article here. This is dealing with World War I. This is from history.com. This deals with when America enters World War I. So at the outbreak of fighting in 1914, at the beginning of World War I, the United States remained on the sidelines of World War I, adopting the policy of neutrality favored by President Woodrow Wilson, who's the president, while continuing to engage in commerce and shipping with European countries on both sides of the conflict. Neutrality, however, was increasingly difficult to maintain in the face of Germany's unchecked submarine aggression against neutral ships, including those carrying passengers. In 1915, Germany declared the waters surrounding the British Isles to be a war zone, and German U-boats sunk several commercial and passenger vessels, including some U.S. ships. Widespread protests over the sinking by U-boat of the British ocean liner Lusitania, traveling from New York to Liverpool. England, with hundreds of Americans on board in May 1915, helped turn the tide of American public opinion against Germany. In February 1917, the U.S. Congress passed a $250 million arms appropriations bill intended to make the United States ready for war. This is in February 1917. Germany sunk 4 more U.S. merchant ships the following month, and on April 2nd of 1917, President Woodrow Wilson appeared before Congress and called for a declaration of war against Germany. A declaration of war against Germany. All right, so check out this article here. That's an excerpt of it. World War I. This is from history.com, official website of the History Channel, World War I. We'll post this article here on the thread of the broadcast. How's everybody doing? All right. Is that Dr. Greg Carr on YouTube? How's everybody doing? If that's Greg, hey Greg, check your I'm gonna hit you up on Twitter. I gotta get you on my show. I inboxed you on Twitter a couple months ago. I gotta get you back. We were on Roland Martin Unfiltered together. I gotta get you back. I have to get you back on my show. All right, let's continue here. So I want to look at this. We've talked about the Red Summer 1919 a number of times before, and 2019 was the the 400th year anniversary of August 2016-19 in Virginia. 2019 for African American History Month, the annual theme coming from ASALH, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, was dealing with this 400th year anniversary. And during my African American History Month presentation for 2019, I talked about the Great Migration of basically 1915 to 1970. And you had 6 million African Americans migrating from the South up north and out west. And then within that, also within that 400th year anniversary of 1619 to 2019 was a 100-year anniversary of the Red Summer. Okay. And the Red Summer is basically taking place the year after 1918. And you have about over 25 major race riots in this country. And these white men are coming back home from fighting in the war. And a lot of the jobs that they left behind were being filled by African Americans and immigrants who were in this country. And we're going to see a racial explosion. But many of these brothers who fought World War I, they're coming back. You have 380,000 African American World War I veterans, right? They're coming back, and they learn how to fight and how to kill in World War I. So they're protecting their communities. When these race riots break out, we're fighting back and shooting back in many cases also. All right. So we've talked about the Red Summer before, but when we deal with this like chronology of history, all of this history just flows together. So history.com also has an article dealing with Red Summer 1919, how Black World War I vets fought back against racist mobs. Okay. And we're going to bring that one up also. All right. I want to look quickly here at this one from Time.com, Time magazine. African-American veterans hoped their service in World War I would secure their rights at home. It didn't. Because when these brothers come back home, there's a new sense of pride. You have what's known as the new Negro. And these brothers are called race men. So there's a new sense of pride, and they come back home and they say, we want all of our rights now. We fought for this country. Many of us died for this country. We want first-class citizenship. We want all of our rights now. We're not coming back dealing with the racism, the segregation, etc. It's the same thing brothers said when they came back home from World War II. It's the same thing. And they had the Double V campaign during World War II, victory abroad against the Axis forces, against Germany, against Hitler, and then victory here at home, overcoming racism. So 100 years ago on November 11th, a date commemorated as Veterans Day, which will be observed on Monday. So back in 2018, when this article came out, Monday, November 12th, 2018, the Great War, or World War I, you had 380,000 African-American soldiers who had served in the United States Army during World War I. Let me see. I want to skip forward here. So they're talking about when coming back home, and in April 2nd, 1917, in President Woodrow Wilson's April 2nd, 1917 War Declaration address before Congress, he proclaimed, quote, "The world must be made safe for democracy. The world must be made safe for democracy." With this evocative phrase, President Woodrow Wilson framed the purpose and higher cause of American participation in the war. The United States had no selfish aims, and true to its creed, would fight only to ensure that the principles of democracy become enshrined on a global level. Now, African Americans immediately recognized the hypocrisy of President Woodrow Wilson's words. On the eve of the American entry into the war, democracy was a distant reality for African Americans. Disfranchisement, segregation, debt peonage, and racial violence rendered most African American citizens in name only. It rendered most African Americans citizens in name only. A. Philip Randolph, a young socialist and editor of the radical black newspaper, The Messenger, spoke for many African Americans when he wrote, quote, "We would rather make Georgia safe for the Negro. We would rather make Georgia safe for the Negro," as opposed to fighting in World War I and going overseas and fighting for America. A. Philip Randolph, president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, is saying that, well, he's later going to become president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. He's saying we would rather make Georgia safe for the Negro. Nevertheless, the majority of African Americans embraced their civic and patriotic duty to support the war. African Americans had fought heroically in every war since the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, and they would do so again by demonstrating their loyalty to the nation as soldiers and civilians. African Americans believed they would be rewarded with greater civil rights. African Americans believed they would be rewarded with greater civil rights. White supremacy tested the patriotism of African Americans throughout the war. Racial violence worsened, the most horrific example being a massacre that took place in July 1917 in East St. Louis, Illinois. East St. Louis, Illinois, that left over 100 African Americans dead, and an entire neighborhoods reduced to ashes. Now, because of this East St. Louis race riot in 1917, then this is going to lead to the Silent March of 1917, organized by James Weldon Johnson of the NAACP, and you're going to have 10,000 African Americans marching down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. 10,000 African Americans marching down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, and they were demanding a federal anti-lynching law, All right. And then we're still trying to get a federal anti-lynching law. The last attempt for a federal anti-lynching law, that was early, either 2019 or 2020. It was in the U.S. Senate, and Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Cory Booker, and even Senator Tim Scott, Black Tea Party from Republican from South Carolina, who half the time doesn't even act like he's black. Okay, he even supported the bill, but it was blocked in the U.S. Senate by Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky. Okay, the federal anti-lynching bill. So now the Congressional Black Caucus has taken that bill and they've put it into the Jobs and Justice Act of 2020. Okay, along with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that they could not get passed in the Senate. The Republicans came out with a much weaker bill. Used Senator Tim Scott. He was the sponsor of the bill. They used him as the mascot for the bill. It was a much weaker bill. So the Democrats and the Congressional Black Caucus could not get the stronger bill passed in the Senate. This is why those two Senate races in Georgia on January 5th, Reverend Warnock against Senator Kelly Loeffler, and John Ossoff, the Democrat, against Senator David Perdue, Republican. That's why those two special elections, those runoff elections, are so important, because the Democrats win both of those, then they'll have control of the Senate, which means Moscow Mitch McConnell will not be Senate Majority Leader, so he won't control the Senate. So he won't determine which bills come to the floor for debate, which bills come to the floor for vote, when they go on recess. He won't be in control of the Senate. Now, Republicans have already reelected him as their leader in the Senate. Okay, whether he's going to be Majority Leader or Minority Leader depends upon those two Senate races, January 5th in Georgia. That's why that's so crucial to be able to get many of these bills passed in the Senate. Okay, so we have the East St. Louis race riot of 1917. African-American soldiers also had a trying experience. The Army remained rigidly segregated, and the War Department relegated the majority of African-American troops to labor duties. African-American combat soldiers fought with dignity, but still had to confront systemic racial discrimination and slander from their fellow white soldiers and officers. With the armistice that took place November 11th, 1918, with the armistice, African Americans fully expected that their service and sacrifice would be recognized. They had labored and shed blood for democracy abroad and now expected full democracy at home. The death of Charles Lewis was the first ominous warning that this would not be the case. Okay. Now, so they talk about, let me scroll back up here. So they talk about Charles Lewis, who was an African-American World War I veteran. And on the night of December 15th, 1918, a police officer stormed into Charles Lewis's shack, accusing him of robbery. Lewis, wearing his uniform and claiming the rights of a soldier, resisted arrest and fled. He was soon captured and jailed in nearby Hickman, but by challenging white authority, a line had been crossed. Local whites were determined to teach Charles Lewis and other African Americans a lesson. And this was in this was in Kentucky, Station, Kentucky, small town of Station, Kentucky. Around midnight, a mob of approximately 100 masked men stormed the jail. They pulled Charles Lewis out of his cell, tied a rope around his neck, and hung him from a nearby tree. As the sun rose the next morning, crowds gathered to view Charles Lewis' lynched body. While combat in France may have concluded with the armistice of November 11th, 1918, for African Americans, the war continued. World War I transformed America, and through the demands of patriotism, brought the nation together in unprecedented ways. But these demands also exposed deep tensions and contradictions, most vividly in regard to race. African Americans fought a war within the war. African Americans fought a war within the war, as white supremacy proved to be harder to defeat than the German army was. Okay, so if we look at, so as a New York newspaper wrote about the lynching of Charles Lewis, quote, and the point is made that every loyal American Negro who has served with the colors may fairly ask, is this our reward for what we have done? Is this our reward for what we have done? Now, in the months following the armistice, racial tensions across the country increased. African American soldiers returned to their homes, eager to resume their lives, but also possessing a deeper appreciation of their social and political rights. A deeper appreciation of their social and political rights. Many white Americans, both North and South, worried that this would mean for a tenuous racial status quo that was based on African Americans remaining subservient and knowing their place. These fears translated into violence. Throughout the summer of 1919, race riots erupted across the country, most notably in Washington, D.C. and Chicago. In Elaine, Arkansas, an effort by African-American sharecroppers to organize for better wages enraged local whites and led to a massacre that left upwards to 200 African-Americans dead. This is the Elaine, Arkansas race riot of 1919, where you had African-American sharecroppers who were trying to organize to get better wages. Okay? The Elaine, Arkansas race riot of 1919. The number of lynchings of African Americans skyrocketed to 76 by the end of 1919, with several African American veterans, some still in uniform, amongst the victims. The famed author, diplomat, and civil rights leader James Weldon Johnson named these bloody months of 1919 the Red Summer. He called it the Red Summer because the streets of America were flowing with blood. It's called the Red Summer because of James Weldon Johnson. And it was also James Weldon Johnson in 1899 who wrote the lyrics to what would be called Lift Every Voice and Sing, which became the Black National Anthem. That was James Weldon Johnson also. So despite the vicious backlash, African Americans did not surrender. The war had changed African Americans, and they remained determined to make democracy in the United States a reality. A generation of new Negroes, the new Negroes, infused with a stronger racial and political consciousness, would continue the fight for civil rights and lay the groundwork for future generations. They took the words of Dr. W.B. Du Bois to heart when he wrote in the May 1919 editorial, Returning Soldiers. He said, we return from fighting, we return fighting. We return from fighting, we return fighting. Make war for democracy. We saved it in France, and by the great Jehovah, we will have it in the United States of America, or know the reason why, end quote. Now, a century after the armistice, African Americans, whether in the military, the halls of Congress, or in local communities, continue to stand on the front lines in the fight to make democracy a reality in the United States. The lessons of World War I remain relevant today as we still struggle to know the reason why. So check out this article. You can read it in its entirety from time.com. African-American veterans hoped their service in World War I would secure their rights at home. It didn't. This is written by Chad Wilson, November 12th, 2018, for Time Magazine, time.com. So I want to look at this other one here for. I want to look at this other one here from history.com. I'm dealing with the Red Summer, and I want to see if I could pull up my slides here from one of my presentations. You can get my 6 DVD bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019, 1619 to 2019, at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And it deals with the presentation I did during African American History Month in February 2019. It deals with Black migrations. I have a whole presentation on this. But I want to look at, I deal with the Red Summer and all of that history. I deal with the Great Migration, all that in this presentation. How's everybody doing? Also, if you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show, paypal.me / the AHN Show. All right. Let me flip over here to the presentation, and let me pull this up here dealing with the Red Summer. So also at this time, you're going to have Dr. Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, founded in September 9th, 1915 in Chicago. And the Asala is gaining steam, and African Americans are moving up north, and they're learning more about their history. And then in 1926, you have a Negro History Week that's celebrated for the first time, also second week in February. But this is, so we have the Great Migration taking place, and World War I taking place within a larger context of the Great Migration. Okay. And then the Red Summer 1919 taking place within the larger context of the Great Migration. And at the same time, you have the Great Pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 taking place also, 1918 going into 1919. So all this is taking place together. Let me turn on the screen share here so you can see this. How's everybody doing? We're gonna wrap up. Yeah, we're gonna wrap up with this. Yeah. Let's go to this slide here. Wait a second, that's the wrong one. All right. Let's look at the Great Migration. Okay, because World War I, the Red Summer of 1919, all this takes place in a larger context of the Great Migration. So the Great Migration was the relocation of more than 6 million African Americans from the rural South to the cities of the North, Midwest, and West from about 1916 to 1970, or about 1915 to 1970. Driven from their homes by unsatisfactory economic opportunities and harsh segregationist laws, many African Americans headed north, where they took advantage of the need for industrial workers that first arose during the First World War. During the Great Migration, African Americans began to build a new place for themselves in public life, actively confronting racial prejudice as well as economic, political, and social challenges to create a Black urban culture that would exert a Black urban culture that would just a second, hold on, let me see the rest of the slide. All right, let's see here. Okay, so a Black urban culture that would exert enormous influence in the decades to come. Okay, so by the end of 1919, some 1 million African Americans had left the South, usually traveling by train, boat, or bus. A smaller number had automobiles or even horse-drawn carts. In the decade between 1910 and 1920, the African American population of major northern cities grew by large percentages, including New York, 66%, Chicago, 148%, Philadelphia, 500%, and Detroit, 611%. Okay, so we're moving into these areas. Let me see. Hold on. Let's. All right. Yeah, so we're moving into these cities. We're going to work in factories, and we see the population in that first decade of the Great Migration. We see the population of African Americans in these cities explode. Okay. In New York, 66%, the percentage of African Americans in New York increases by 66% from 1910 to 1920. In Chicago, 148%, Philadelphia, 500%, and Detroit, where I live, 611%. It's exploding. All right. And you know, we had Henry Ford, Ford Motor Company in Highland Park, Michigan. He starts out there in Highland Park in about 1908. And African Americans are migrating up north, going to work in for Ford Motor Company also. Okay, now rising rents in segregated areas, plus a resurgence of Ku Klux Klan activity after 1915, because the movie The Birth of a Nation helps to rejuvenate the Ku Klux Klan, worsened African American and white relations across the country. The summer of 1919 began the greatest period of interracial strife in U.S. history at that time, including a disturbing wave of race riots. Check out this article here from history.com called Great Migration, from history.com. So we see that African American migration slowed considerably in the 1930s when the country sank into the Great Depression. We talked about the Great Depression back on our October 29th show, because that was the day of the stock market crash, October 29th, 1929. So we dealt with the stock market crash of 1929, which basically led to the Great Depression. And then it's going to be World War II that brings the U.S. out of the Great Depression. But picked up again with the coming of World War II. Now, by 1970, when the Great Migration ended, its demographic impact was unmistakable. Whereas in 1900, 9 out of every 10 African Americans lived in the South. 90% of African Americans lived in the South in 1900 as a legacy of slavery, basically, as a legacy of slavery. And 3 out of every 4 African Americans lived on farms in 1900. 75% of African Americans lived on farms in 1900. By 1970, 70 years later, the South was home to less than half of the country's African Americans, with only 25% living in the region's rural areas. Okay, so we're moving up north, west. When we look at the Red Summer, so the Red Summer 1919 marked the culmination of steadily growing tensions surrounding the Great Migration. Okay, steadily growing tensions surrounding the Great Migration of African Americans from the rural South to the cities of the North that took place during World War I. When the war ends in late 1918, thousands of servicemen returned home from fighting in Europe to find that their jobs in factories, warehouses, and mills had been filled by newly arrived Southern African Americans or immigrants. Amid financial insecurity, racial and ethnic prejudices ran rampant. Meanwhile, African American veterans who had risked their lives fighting for the causes of freedom and democracy found themselves denied basic rights such as adequate housing and equality under the law, leading them to become increasingly militant. Okay, leading them to become increasingly militant. So we see the Chicago race riot of July 27th, 1919. We say this takes place. This is an African-American World War I veteran's uniform confronting a member of the state militia. This is on the Chicago South Side. All right. We have the Harlem Renaissance that's taking place also during the 1910s through the 1930s. So if we look at this article here from History.com, Red Summer 1919, how Black World War I vets fought against racist mobs. Okay. So I wanted to lay out some of that background history to lead up to this here. So the ink had barely dried on the Treaty of Versailles, which formally ended World War I, when recently returned African-American veterans grabbed their guns and stationed themselves on rooftops in African-American neighborhoods in Washington, D.C., prepared to act as snipers in the case of mob violence in July of 1919. Others set up blockades around Howard University, an African-American intellectual hub, creating a protective ring around residents. White sailors, recently home from the war, had been on a days-long drunken rampage. White soldiers who had white soldiers recently home from the war had been on a days-long drunken rampage, assaulting and in some cases lynching African Americans on the capital's streets, on the streets of Washington, D.C. The relentless onslaught proved contagious, escalating in dozens of cities across the U.S. in what will become known as the Red Summer. The racist attacks in 1919 were widespread and other indiscriminate and often indiscriminate, but in many places they were initiated by white servicemen and centered upon the 380,000 African-American veterans who had just returned from war. So most of this stuff, it was white people starting this, okay? And we responded and defended ourselves and defended our communities. Quote, because of their military service, African-American veterans were seen as a particular threat to Jim Crow and racial subordination, end quote, notes a report by the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, Equal Justice Initiative, and attorney Brian Stevenson. Okay. So because white people wanted African Americans to come back and resume their position of being subservient in this country. And brothers are coming back with a new consciousness. They say, no, we fought for this country. Many of us died for this country. We want all of our rights now. We want first-class citizenship now. We're not dealing with the racism, Jim Crow, lynchings, all that stuff. We want all of our rights now. So indeed, many African-American soldiers returned from the war armed with a renewed determination to fight segregation and a near constant barrage of brutality. A postal official wrote at the time that, quote, as far back as the first movement of the American troops to France, the Negro publicists began to avail themselves of the argument that since the Negro was fit to wear the uniform, he was therefore fit for everything else. They made the argument that since the Negro was fit to wear the uniform of the United States, then he was fit for everything else. In Texas, a federal agent reported, quote, one of the principal elements causing concern is the returned Negro soldier who is not readily fitting back into his prior status of pre-war times. They wanted them to go and fight in the war and die, and then those that don't die come back shot up, come back with shell shock, and then go back to being a good Negro. Brothers coming back home said, we ain't going for this. We want all of our rights now. At the same time, cities across the North were being reshaped by the Great Migration. By the end of 1919, about 1 million African Americans had fled segregation and a total lack of economic opportunities in the South. They fled for northern cities. Between 1910 and American population in Chicago grew by 148%, in Philadelphia 500%, creating massive anxiety among white people in northern cities that African Americans were taking jobs, and you had competition for housing. And it was a fear that many white people had of being overrun by these Negroes moving into their communities. During the Red Summer 1919, massive anxiety became mass violence. Between April and November 1919, there would be approximately 25 race riots and instances of mob violence, 97 recorded lynchings, and a 3-day-long massacre in Elaine, Arkansas, during which over 200 African-American men, women, and children were killed after African-American sharecroppers tried to organize for better working conditions. The Ku Klux Klan, which had been largely shut down by the government after the Civil War, experienced a resurgence in popularity and began carrying out dozens of lynchings across the South, because the Ku Klux Klan is going to be rejuvenated in 1915. You have a new incarnation of the Klan in 1915. The 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act, okay, which is one of the 3 Force Acts, FORCE, during Reconstruction, that's largely going to really clamp down or really tamp down the activities of the Ku Klux Klan. And we know in October of 1871, it's going to be President Ulysses S. Grant who declares martial law in South Carolina, attacking the activities of the Ku Klux Klan. We talked about that here on this show. So 1915, you have a rejuvenation of the Klan, and it's going to be Klan activities and Republicans ignoring the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, and then the Lily White movement of 1928, which was an effort by Republicans to push African Americans out of the Republican Party and help Herbert Hoover win election in the 1928 presidential election. This is going to push us out of the Republican Party, and we slowly start to go over to the Democratic Party. So you have to understand the chronology of all this history. All these events are connected. Historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of historical events, or as one of my teachers, Professor Kabahaya Watha Kamene, says, to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. So just a few years earlier, many African-American men had heeded President Woodrow Wilson's call to make the world safe for democracy, and they had gone off to fight for America in one of history's bloodiest wars, World War I. Now they had come back to a country that recognized neither their service nor their humanity. They came back to a country that recognized neither their service nor their humanity. Having just returned from battle, however, African-American veterans were not inclined to take the abuse lying down. Across the country, former soldiers used their government-provided weapons training to defend their neighborhoods against vicious white mobs. These brothers learn how to fight and how to kill in the war, and they're using those skills when they come back to defend their communities against white supremacists. Also, let's see, this is one of the good things about us going to fight in the war. We learn how to we learn how to fight. We learn military strategy, and we learn how to fight and how to kill so we can defend our communities. The same thing happened in the Civil War, because when these brothers come back from the Civil War, they're using military strategy also to defend their communities as well. If you look at the movie Rosewood, 1977, John Singleton, the character that Ving Rhames played, the character of man, and we're gonna wrap this up because it's getting okay. We've been here too long. The character named Man, MANN, that Ving Rhames played, is a fictitious character. He's probably a composite character. He's probably a combination of various actions that real life people took exhibited in there during the Rosewood Massacre, January 1923. But he was a former World War I veteran also, and he uses military strategy. He knows how to use weapons. He carries 245 handguns. He knows how to use pistols. He knows how to shoot. He knows how to fight. And he uses military strategy to organize them and get the children to safety, get the women to safety, and to fight there. Okay. Quote, quote, Black people formed ad hoc self-defense organizations to try to keep white folks from terrorizing their communities, end quote, says Simon Balto, B-A-L-T-O, a professor of African-American history at the University of Iowa and author of the book Occupied Territory, Policing Black Chicago from Red Summer to Black Power. Occupied Territory, Policing Black Chicago from Red Summer to Black Power. He said, quote, Black veterans are instrumental in that, end quote. Now, African-American veterans were a very large part of what made the summer 1919, in the words of historian David F. Krugler, Krugler, the year that African-Americans fought back. Quote, this is the country to which we soldiers of democracy return. This is the fatherland for which we fought, Dr. W.B. Du Bois, a civil rights activist and prominent intellectual, wrote in the Crisis magazine in May of 1919, a month after the earliest event of the Red Summer, a riot in Georgia where 6 people, 2 white officers and 4 African-American men were killed at a church. Quote, Dr. W.B. Du Bois went on to say, but by the God of heaven, we are cowards and jackasses if now that the war is over, we do not marshal every ounce of brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our own land, end quote. So you're going to have riots at the steps of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. had 5,000 African-American veterans. And for many of them, self-defense was a last resort after weeks and indeed decades of government inaction. One of the first people killed in Washington, D.C.'s violence was a 22-year-old African-American veteran named Randall Neal, N-E-A-L. At a high point of the mayhem, one Washington newspaper reported that the city had, quote, passed through its wildest and bloodiest night since Civil War times, end quote. Many of the city's white-owned newspapers fanned the flames of terror, reporting on fabricated instances of African-American men assaulting white women. In one case, the Washington Post ran a front-page story advertising the location for white servicemen to meet and carry out further attacks on African-Americans in the city. Washington, D.C. had a vibrant African-American middle class that in many ways epitomized African-American slow but expanding economic and social advances. The city's African-American population was growing rapidly thanks to the Great Migration. And in 1919, they made up a quarter of the population. They also held many jobs in the federal government and at the country's first African-American owned bank, the Industrial Savings Bank. It was a limited but steady march forward, one that many white people felt needed to be stopped. In the Crisis magazine, James Weldon Johnson, who coined the term the Red Summer, wrote, quote, I knew it to be true, but it was almost an impossibility for me to realize as a truth that men and women of my race were being mobbed, chased, dragged from streetcars, beaten and killed within the shadow of the dome of the Capitol at the very front door of the White House. As the situation escalated, President Woodrow Wilson refused to act. He worried that the riots would damage the image he was cultivating of the United States as a global paragon of justice. President Woodrow Wilson also had a demonstrated record of racism, including, among other things, tacit support of the Ku Klux Klan. He reminds me of another president, one we have right now. After 4 days of racist mob violence in Washington, D.C., an estimated 40 people were killed and dozens more were injured. The chaos was only quelled when 2,000 federal troops were deployed onto the city streets at the end of the month, just in time for the riots to spread to Chicago. All right. Check out the rest of this article here. This is from history.com. It's a really, really good article dealing with the Red Summer in African American World War I veterans. Red Summer 1919, how Black World War I veterans fought back against racist mobs. So the conclusion of the Red Summer 1919 would not be the end of mass violence against African Americans. Far from it. 2 years later, we would see one of the worst instances of racial violence in American history, the Tulsa Race Massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, June 1921, during which a white mob attacked residents' homes and businesses in the predominantly African American Greenwood neighborhood of Tulsa. News reports were largely squelched, despite the fact that up to 300 people were killed and thousands left homeless. And it was most likely more than 300 killed. That was the reporting from the Red Cross. It did, however, signal a permanent shift in the way African Americans responded to white violence in the United States and presaged increasing self-defense tactics. Increasing self-defense tactics, including when African American veterans once again mobilized during the violence in Tulsa, because there's a lot of retired World War I veterans that lived in Tulsa, and we fought back and shot back when the white people invaded our community the morning of June 1st, 1921. For many African Americans, the way veterans responded to the bloodshed added a sliver of inspiration to the terror of that summer of 1919. Before the war, the NAACP had 9,000 members, yet by the early 1920s, it had 100,000 members, signaling a growing boldness and cohesion to the organizing that would eventually plant the seeds of the civil rights movement. All right. So check out the rest of this article here from history.com. This is written by Abigail Higgins from July 26, 2019, Red Summer 1919, how Black World War I vets fought back against racist mobs. All right, everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms, and be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and turn on live notifications so you know when we go live. And also follow us on our Facebook, on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Turn on live notifications there so you know when I click on the bell, so you know when we up new videos. And also, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. We have a bundle pack, a DVD bundle pack, Black Migration 1619 to 2019, Black Migration 1619 to 2019. 6 DVD bundle pack includes my presentation doing Black Migration 1619 to 2019, 6 principles of political self-defense. I have one dealing with the history of African American jockeys and how we used to dominate horse racing, and we won a lot of the early Kentucky Derbies. In 13 of the 15 jockeys in the first Kentucky Derby ran in 1875, where African-American jockeys. The first Kentucky Derby was won by a 19-year-old African-American man named Oliver Lewis. His trainer for his horse was a former slave, Ansel Williamson, if I remember correctly, was his name. We used to dominate horse racing till there was an organized effort by white men to push us out of horse racing. Okay, so we posted the link there to Black Migration 1619. We have in the digital download format, the bundle pack, and on DVD. Is also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, look, so happy Veterans Day, and thanks for your service to all the veterans. Regardless of whether or not you agree with their service, will agree with the war that they fight or anything like that. You know, we thank them for their service. All right. So we're going to get out of here. We'll be back tomorrow night. Remember, we're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight. We're never here for just an hour. We always go over. Look out for me on Friday, this Friday on Roland Martin Unfiltered. I'm a panelist each Friday. And listen to our show Sunday nights, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time also. So on 9, 10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF here in Detroit. Monday through 6 days a week. And then all these shows are on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, and they're in audio podcast format. So just wherever you get your podcast from, search for The African History Network show. You can also go to AfricanHistoryNetwork.com and click on listen to podcasts as well, because we upload our shows to Blog Talk Radio, blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network show. And then they're automatically uploaded to other podcast platforms. All right, African American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast, and we'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. So a lot of people want to invest in the stock market, and the ProfitRoom.com can help you do this. Now, the ProfitRoom.com is a stock market trading and education company that has mentorship programs that are designed for beginners. They teach individuals how to create generational wealth through trading and investing in the financial markets. They specialize in one-on-one mentorship and day trading, but they also teach about stocks, options, futures, and the foreign exchange markets. Okay. Visit their website, theprofitroom.com, theprofitroom.com, PROFIT. Let them know you found out about this from the African History Network. Now, have you tasted the No Frowny Brownie Mix yet? Okay, from the pinkbakery.com. Now, the pinkbakery.com is the first Black-owned Big 8 allergen-free baking mix company. Okay, if you haven't tasted their No Frowny Brownie Mix, what are you waiting for? They are vegan, gluten-free, and free of the Big 8 allergens. Visit their website, thepinkbakery.com, thepinkbakery.com. All right, African American business owners, email us at customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise African History Network. All right, we're going to get out of here. Remember, the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever.
Melanized Media is an independently Black-owned and operated film company. We specialize in producing culturally enriching Black films and videos at melanizedmedia.com. Join us every Sunday for Melanized Nights, where we screen a socially conscious documentary film or Black historic presentation. That's every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Visit melanizedmedia.com to learn more and to register. That's MELANEYES media.com. Peace.
Al-Cubalan's lifestyle attitude is servitude. They focus on providing you quality products and customer service. They're here to fulfill your African men's and women's clothing, accessories, health and beauty products, essential oils and fragrances, hair care products, and much, much more. Check out their collection of clothing and products for African kings and queens. Visit their website, alkebulanlife.com, ALKEBULAN, alkebulanlife.com. They look forward to serving you. Author Melinda Merritt is the author of 2 books, Merit Magic and Age of Aquarius, Spiritual Reckoning. In the book Merit Magic, this book is about the civil rights movement of the 1960s and how her family played a very important role in this movement. It is about all of the civil rights leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, and many others of this nation who came to her small Georgia town and started the movement that spread across this nation. This book tells the wonderful story of 3 powerful women who did amazing things because they had inherited special gifts from their African ancestry and used them to help the cause. These ancestral gifts seem to have been forgotten at this stage in our history. The second book, Age of Aquarius, Spiritual Reckoning, discusses the relationship between humans and the 10 spheres of the Tree of Life. Author Melinda Merritt was able to show some very interesting facts about the present and past presidents of the United States as it relates to what they did while in office. The current president is living up to the negative impact he has brought to this space. This book shows how astrology impacts people in ways that they may not be aware of. It discusses the change in the status of religion in this country, as we can easily see. There is a major change happening in that area. Visit the website merit-magic.com. That's merit-magic.com, MERRITT, and get both books for only $20.